I love folk horror movies. There is just something about the combination of a folk tale and the genre of horror that just blend so well together. If you show me a movie that has that kind of element to it, I am 100% on board and excited about it. Gwen is a 2018 historical drama about a 14-year-old girl living on a farm in Wales around the time of the Industrial Revolution. Like, it doesn't get specific into the year, but I believe it is around the time of the Industrial Revolution, and a series of hardships fall on her and her family. So, right out of the gate, you may have noticed that I didn't say horror movie in the opening log line. And that's because, despite all the marketing materials in this film to the contrary, it is not a horror film. I'll tell you, let me get into the story a bit first, and then I'll explain more. So Gwen, played by Elenore Worthington-Cox, is a girl living with her mother and her little sister on a farm in Wales. She spends her days working on the farm, tending to the livestock, various chores around the house, that sort of thing. Her dad is currently away at war, and the local quarry has started to become kind of big business in the area. At the same time, an outbreak of cholera has made its way through some of the households in the nearby communities, causing kind of whole families to die. So suffice to say, pressure to stay afloat is pretty high for this family. And nowhere does that show more than with the mother, Ellen, played by Maxine Peake. She is clearly stressed and aggravated and exhausted by kind of becoming the head of this family while her husband is away. Now, as they wait for the return of the father, strange things begin to happen on the farm. Noises outside in the middle of the night, livestock gets murdered, chickens stop laying viable eggs, and the family is then kind of pressured to sell their farm and move on. However, they decide to stick with it, but this causes rumors to be circulated amongst the other families, and slowly they're sort of separated from their own community. Now, one of the things I really thought was excellent in this movie was that everything was told from Gwen's perspective. Now, with the exception of maybe like one or two moments, if Gwen walks away from a particular interaction, we don't hear what's being spoken in that interaction.
Good to see you in chapel this morning. I wanted to speak to you together.
And so it's really a great way to see this entire story specifically from her eyes. Now, this ends up being important because of how the story is framed in general, and of course of the previously mentioned kind of horror problem. And actually, while we're talking about Gwen, let's talk about the actress who played Gwen, Elenore Worthington-Cox. She delivers such a phenomenal performance here. Now, I hadn't seen her before, but the weight of the story is firmly placed on her shoulders, and she handles it fantastically. The movie is fully from her eyes, and Worthington-Cox plays her with a strength and resilience without losing that innocence of youth. It's really just a fully captivating performance out of the young actor, and she really does command the screen throughout the film, as she is just sort of thrust into taking care of this household as her mother falls ill and the misfortunes kind of begin to pile up. Let's dig a little deeper on the horror problem. This movie reminds me of when you go to like a karaoke bar and all the songs that are listed say like, Don't Stop Believin' in the style of Journey. This movie is a historical drama in the style of a horror film. Now, I wonder if The Witch that came out in 2015 was a heavy influence on this film. In that movie as well, it's a very subtle in its horror elements. And when things happen, they can be dismissed as sort of several different types of things. However, that movie kind of slowly leans more and more into its horror as the movie goes on. With this movie, it felt like it wanted to do that so bad, but the story didn't really account for it. Instead, it's like Gwen is the movie equivalent of edging, right? Like, it keeps threatening to become a horror movie, get right to that edge, but then it pulls back. By the time you get to the end, harsh reality comes into focus that it's just never going to actually get there. Now, my problem with that is expectation versus reality. Now, I get it. It shouldn't play that big of a role in this. And in a perfect world, I should be able to come into it with a blank slate. But if you sell a movie as a horror movie and you tag it as a horror and you give it posters and marketing like a creepy atmospheric horror movie, then yank the horror rug out from under me, it's gonna be a little annoying. Like, all right, I remember when I saw The Village years ago, M. Night's very divisive fork in the road for most people. The trailer for it all showed this really creepy horror film, and I was psyched to see what he would do with just sort of this straight up horror movie. And then it was all a fake. And this movie kind of goes a step further where it just keeps teasing the horror. It keeps teasing that it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. They find a nailed heart to the door. The sheep are slaughtered. The mom seems to do these strange rituals. The mother is dealing with some sort of strange sickness. She seems to act in these very odd ways. The townsfolk turn against the family. But after all of that, it kind of just amounts to money and greed. Now, I understand that this story is told from Gwen's perspective, and so they are her perceptions. And because she is a child, she sees these things as possible supernatural or horror in nature. But even when she starts putting pieces together and assessing what's going on, she ends up coming to a conclusion that's far more grounded than what the movie tries to tease. As a result, the movie can come off as feeling a little too manipulative. All said and done, the movie is a grim tale about the harsh reality of living on the edge of the Industrial Revolution as the country tries to transition away from the old ways and to embrace the new, and anyone standing in the way gets trampled under their giant might of money and power. There is a great line from Ellen as she starts to realize kind of what's going on around her.
Steal a sheep, and they'll take your hand. Steal a mountain, and they'll make you a lord.
The acting is fantastic, and all the behind-the-camera elements are really just top-notch. The lighting, production design, everything feels real and lived in. The decision to use very minimal musical score was so appreciated. I've mentioned in the past that how much I think movies tend to rely on music too much, and how that can actually be a detriment at times. This movie is almost completely void of music, with the exception of really just a couple scenes. It's such a well-made film overall. My biggest disappointment, aside from the horror rug being pulled out from under me, is that it just kind of stops. Like, there isn't any type of cathartic ending. So I would say if you can be okay with that, then I would recommend it. I would give this movie a just general rating of a B+, because it is a very good movie. But once again, it's not a horror movie. Let me know what you think.